All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Coach Krisler's Combos. I'm joined today by an old friend, Courtney. And so if you are new here, this is just a place where we have a conversation about functional medicine and allow people to share about their health journeys and how they've used functional medicine along the way. So, Courtney, thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Well, before we jump into talking about your health journey, tell everyone who you are, where you are from, and what you do.
Okay, yeah. So my name's Courtney, like she said. I'm currently living in Lawton, Oklahoma, which is where I was born and raised. So that is where I grew up. I graduated from the University of Oklahoma in 2017, and now I'm in grad school at Cameron University in Lawton, Oklahoma for my master's in behavioral science and professional counseling. So that's my newest adventure. I waited a few years to go back to school, but I've been back in about a year now. So I'm excited about that. I am the program director and head coach at Fliptastic Gymnastics in Lawton, Oklahoma, which is a family business. My parents and I own it and run it together, and they've owned it since 2000. So 23, it actually will be 23 years in September. So we're coming up on that 23-year mark. I grew up as a gymnast, so gymnastics has always been my passion and something that has really driven me. And so that's what I chose to make my career out of. And then as far as me personally, I do CrossFit. I'm a CrossFit athlete. That's the one thing I found post gymnastics career that really like set my heart on fire. I had a really hard time finding something after I retired from gymnastics, and that was it. So I still do that. Other than that, I'm just kind of a nerd who loves learning. I'm a dog mom, really proud dog mom. Ollivander Knox and Buka Claire, they're my children. I'm a wife. My husband is not here today. He works in Oklahoma City most of the week. He's an engineer up there. So it's just me at the house today. But other than that, I just live my life trying to be 1% better each day. So
Great goal. Great goal. So, thank you for sharing all of that.
yeah.
It's going to be, I know that there are those out there that probably can connect with you in some way, either, being in the grad school life and navigating all of that, or being somebody who has ended one type of athletic activity and sought, seeking another, or even, being a wife or whatever. So, I know somebody out there is going to hear it and go, oh, yeah, sounds like me. And that's exactly why we have these conversations, because, somebody will connect with the different experiences or stories, or even some of the pain points that people have experienced along the way. So I want to talk about your health journey. So, of course, we are friends on social media,
Yeah.
and I get to see how you share about your health journey and just different things that you do, or you've changed, or you've learned. And I love seeing that. So, I guess first, just tell me a little bit about, why you are pursuing health in the way that you are.
Okay. So this is a little bit loaded. So everyone brace yourselves a little bit. I my entire life, starting from about age 5, have really struggled with severe anxiety. I started having panic attacks around the age of 5. Now, of course, at age 5, we didn't know what they were. Um, and so, of course, we went to the doctors, and my stomach was fine, and my head was fine, and my breathing was fine. And so my parents were kind of like, you're fine. Like, we've done all the things, we've been to all the doctors, like you're okay. There's nothing wrong with you. But it still continued to be an issue that I really struggled with for my entire life. And I think it's something that kind of as you go, you just kind of learn how to deal with, learn how to cope with. But I didn't have real coping skills for my entire childhood. So, I would self-soothe by journaling or coloring. And like there were a lot of times when I was younger, my mom would get up to go to the bathroom, and I would be sitting in the living room coloring, and she would be like, "What are you doing? It's 3 a.m." And that's just those are just different ways when I was younger, but it got harder as I got older. Those things
Mhm.
that were like when I was younger, it was very a natural instinct to do the things like journaling and coloring. But as you get older, sometimes those natural instincts get kind of snuffed out by society and the things that come along with adolescence. So it's just something I really struggled with. I started going to counseling when I was pretty young, 5th grade. Unfortunately, they put me on an SSRI when I was pretty young. Same thing, 5th grade. I was about 10 years old. Um, which looking back now, I really wish they wouldn't have done, but there was no data, no research, no information on it back then. So, like I said, it's just something that I had really struggled with my entire life. And then as my early adult years came and I started going through that transition from high school to college, I really started to emerge again. It had been kind of under control because, like I said, it's something you just kind of like learn to deal with. It becomes your
Mhm.
normal. And while it might not be normal, it's common. So it becomes
Mhm.
it becomes the thing that you just
You
deal with.
normalize it.
Yes, yeah,
It's like, okay, this is my thing, so you just normalize it and deal with it.
right. Kind of
Yeah.
hide it. You don't really want people to know about it. You just kind of keep going. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of us can probably relate to that. Like you don't want people to know. You don't want people to see the struggle, so you just kind of keep going and you do what you
Mhm.
got to do and you make it work. And but then when I got into those college years, it got a whole lot harder. Obviously, stresses change. As an aspiring mental health professional, like it's very common for people's problems to either emerge for the first time or really intensify in those early 20s, transitioning
Mhm.
through the college years, becoming an adult. As we know now, the human brain doesn't really fully like stop cooking until 26. There's a lot of development still happening, which is another thing we didn't really know back when I was a kid. But so during those years where you're still developing, becoming an adult, things happen, it gets hard.
Mhm.
And so my 20s were really hard for me. And I
Mhm.
went back to the doctor. Of course, as a college student, you don't really have a consistent doctor. You're seeing a doctor on campus. It's kind of whoever's on duty at the time. There is no consistency. There's
Yeah.
no treatment plan in place. You're
Right.
just kind of
Right.
things are being thrown at you. And so
Yeah.
I did that, and they put me they changed up my medication, and the original thing did not work. It made it way worse. I started having like really intense nightmares and like couldn't leave my house. Like it was a whole ordeal. Finally, they got me on something that was made me feel somewhat normal, and or so I thought. And so I just kind of rode that wave out all the way through my entire 20s. College happened. College has its stressors. You live, you learn, you make mistakes, you grow. Graduated from college. My college journey was a little bit different. I didn't finish in 4 years. I was one of those people who was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. And then we had a little bit of an issue with the family business during my stint in college. And so I had a decision to make, and I made the decision to drop back to part time and commute back and forth to help the family business. So I took over the gymnastics program at a very young age, younger than most people take over a gymnastics program. But I didn't feel like, there was much choice. If I wanted my family business to continue growing, continue thriving, then I needed to do my part for the family. And so that's what I decided to do in my early 20s. I took over the team. And so I was commuting back and forth. And on days I had class, my dad would cover for me. But it was a lot. It was a big change. I had to make some sacrifices, give up some things, make some big decisions. And so I did that. And it took me a little while to get my degree, but I continued. My last semester of college, I I had a really great experience despite the commuting back and forth. I was a senior producer at OU Nightly. I was the television host for Sooner Sports Pad on Fox Sports Oklahoma. I had great opportunities in the television world, internships, and different things like that. But my last semester, I was just kind of frazzled and stressed. I started having symptoms of a bleeding stomach ulcer. I was having troubles eating. It was a whole thing. And so I graduate, move home, and of course the life changers are still coming. They're still coming hard and fast. And my boyfriend at the time, now husband, got a job closer to Lawton, and because he had graduated before me, and we decided to move to Lawton. We bought a house, we signed for our house, and then that month we found out I was pregnant, and I lost the baby a week later. So it was like this whirlwind, and it was like a very sudden and no one saw it coming type thing. Like I found out I was pregnant because I started having these like weird symptoms. This is almost like an untold story. Like I have not publicly shared a lot of this information, so this will be interesting. But I had an IUD at the time, and hormonal birth control, that's a whole nother avenue we could get talking about when it comes to functional medicine. But of course I did what the doctors told me I should do, right? So I had the Nexplanon in my arm, and then my doctor told me that she thought I should switch. So I trusted her. I did it. It was not a good switch for me. The IUD actually ended up getting embedded in my uterus. And so I started having all these weird symptoms, and I started having like severe bleeding, like almost like someone was stabbing me. And that's what sent me to go, like why I called the doctor, because I was like, something's wrong. And then someone jokingly was like, oh, maybe you're pregnant. And I was like, no, there's no way. Like, I have an IUD. And sure enough, I went to the store, I got some cheap pregnancy tests, and they came back positive. And I was like, it's because I got the cheap ones. It's because I got the cheap ones. Let me go back. Let me go back. So I went back, got the nice ones, with the digital. Sure enough, those came back positive too. So I'm freaking out. Now, granted, at this point, I'm in my mid-20s. It's not like I'm a 16-year-old hiding in my parents' bathroom. Like it took me a while to graduate college, so I'm older at this point. But it was still not part of the plan, I guess. And so it was all unraveling very quickly. And so I went to the doctor, and there was kind of drama because I didn't have a doctor established in Lawton yet. So I had to drive back to Norman. And then that doctor was like, I've never seen this before. I don't really know what to do. Let's just leave the IUD in. And so then my doctor in Lawton called me and was like, hey, no, we need to get you in. This sounds like pretty serious. So my doctor in Lawton got me in, and they had a completely different opinion, and they were like, no. Like the IUD has to come out. Like the hormones will clash with each other. It's a bad deal. But they gave me like, hey, when we go to pull it out, there's a chance of miscarriage. And I was like, that makes sense. Like I understand that,
Right.
And so they went to pull it out, and they couldn't find it. And because the string was gone. And so it was just this like very roller coaster type experience. And so they were like, we don't have a choice. We're going to have to leave the IUD in because we can't get it out. And so then it was like I was having these appointments like back to back to back. And then all of a sudden the baby just didn't have a heartbeat. Like it was crazy. It was like this wild thing. So to this day, I don't know if it was because I was only about 8 weeks along, but I don't know if it was the IUD and the hormones clashing, or if it was the stress, or if my body just doesn't carry babies. I'm not sure. But that was kind of the whirlwind post-college that started my downward spiral. That's why I tell you that story. Because things after that just got really rough. And even though it was not planned, it was something that I didn't know how to navigate. I didn't know how to cope with everything that was happening. And so part of me was like sad. Part of me still didn't know what was going on. It happened so fast, and I was being told all these things and thrown all these options. And I was just kind of like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what to do. We ended up having surgery, a DNC and surgery to remove the IUD. And so that happened. My hormones were all over the place. I was struggling. I didn't feel like myself, I couldn't get back in that rhythm. It was rough. Like it was a rough transition period. I was struggling quite a bit. But I didn't realize how bad I was struggling. So
Mm.
I just, kind of like, because I didn't really understand how I felt or what I was dealing with, I just kind of like, whoop, all right, I'll just like box this up. It's not that big of a deal. Like this is stupid. It happened so fast. Like no one will understand. And at
Mhm.
the time I wasn't married, which I was not proud of, And so that was another, like, there was shame involved. There was a lot of shame involved around it as well, even though, like, I knew this was the guy I was going to marry. We had been together quite a few years at this point. Like, we didn't even get married until we had been together 6 years. So we had been together over 3 years at this point, and so there was just, my dad had been in the hospital that entire week that all of this was happening. And so I was scared to tell him because he had been sick. And so there was a lot going on, but I just kind of like stuffed it down and said, keep going, just like
Mhm.
no one will understand. Everyone will judge you. Like
Yeah.
this is not good. This is a bad thing. Like you just got to keep going.
Mhm.
And then of course the doctors wanted to almost immediately put me back on birth control, which I now know was horrible for my hormones. And so I couldn't reestablish a baseline because my hormones were like this in my body. And then they were like, here, let's add some birth control. So I almost immediately went back on the Nexplanon. And so my body just didn't adjust well.
Mhm.
Continue. I'm struggling internally. On the outside, I got it going on. But on the inside, I'm struggling. I'm having a really hard time with it. I don't really want to talk about it. People want me to talk about it. A lot of my family members had very like deep sadness about it that I lost the baby. And I was struggling because I wasn't having that same type of reaction. Like my body
Mhm.
was still confused. And so I was struggling with that too. And so I just kind of like, things just kind of escalated and I was struggling, And so I just kind of kept beating down the path. Fast forward about a year later, and I got sexually assaulted.
Mhm.
And that is something that I did not deal with for probably 3 years. I didn't
Mhm.
even tell anybody for 3 years. And so I was holding on to that. And um, it was eating me alive. I mean, like truly, genuinely eating me alive. And so you kind of combine all those things, everything that had happened, like the stress of graduating, and like for anyone who has just recently graduated, that's like exciting and stressful all on its own because you're like,
Mhm.
I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Like I've been living in this bubble for so long. Everyone thinks they're grown up in college. They're not. Like you're not grown up in college. You have so much growing left to do. That's a very protected, like there are still a lot of authority figures like making sure to the best of their ability that you survive. The
Mhm.
real world isn't like that. Like it's you, like you've got you and you've got to figure it out. And so I had made that transition, and then trying to deal with my new life and my new career, and then buying a new house, and then losing a baby, and then a year later the sexual assault. And it was just kind of this, I was covered in chaos. I was
Mhm.
covered in shame. I was hurting, like to a level that I can't even express into words, you know?
Mhm.
And I didn't feel comfortable talking to anybody about it. I hated myself. Like I genuinely loathed myself. And this spiral continued for, like I said, 3 years. And and I started realizing in 2020 that it started hitting me pretty hard. I'm like, something's not right. Like I am not okay. Like I didn't have all these things figured out yet. I didn't understand the root. I just knew I wasn't okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did go back to counseling, but I didn't really talk about those things. Like I still
It's
was
more
kind of,
surface level.
yeah, it was like, oh, well, these things in my life are stressful. And I had this argument with this person and I'm sad about this. And it was just very like, I'm not ready to deal with my crap,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I did all the things and then I just hit rock bottom. Like I genuinely hit rock bottom. Um, I was a mess. I wasn't functioning as a human being. I was anxious all the time. I was having troubles getting out of bed in the mornings. Like I said, we still had that cycle of like self-loathing. Like I
Mm-hmm.
hated myself. Like I looked in the mirror and I didn't know like how I became that person. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely was just like I was not like I literally couldn't be a person. Like I was doing just enough to get by.
Yeah.
And my parents started realizing that something was off. And so I finally like had a few meltdowns where I just burst into tears and was like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm not okay. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know what's going on. Like, I have a decent life, like I have a job, I have a roof over my head, I have food on my table. Like, I have a good life, but I am suffering and I don't know why. And I feel really stupid. And like, I know y'all aren't going to get it. And and at this point, like I said, I hadn't told them everything. So part of them was probably kind of like confused by all of this. And so I went the route that everyone tells us to go. And I went and saw a psychiatrist. And I had
Mm-hmm.
been putting this off and putting this off and putting this off because the last thing I need is for someone to look at me and tell me I'm crazy. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't need that.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm thinking at the time. And so I go through the whole process and there's all these screenings and I fill out this questionnaire and I talk to multiple people on the phone. This is still during COVID. So like I can't see people face to face. So I'm doing all this over the phone. At this point, I'm still not acknowledging the sexual assault, which I realize now was like, that was basically the root of what I was going through. And
Mm-hmm.
we'll come back to that. But like I wasn't sharing that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I answer all these questions, blah, blah, blah. It's finally time for me to talk to the doctor. I'm sitting in the clinic. They hand me an iPad. The doctor comes up on the iPad, like via FaceTime, talks
Mm-hmm.
to me for 10 minutes. And that is the last I ever heard or saw of the doctor.
Mm.
They up my medication to a very high dose, 200 milligrams, which is pretty large and in charge for someone my age of
Mm-hmm.
Zoloft. And they put me on another medication. And then they try to get me on sleeping pills because I was obviously struggling with nightmares and things like that, which
Mm-hmm.
again, didn't realize why at the time, do now. And so basically their idea was to just drug me up. So they give me all these medications and that's supposed to fix me. And I start taking them. And over a month, I wear a whoop band. And I don't know if you've heard of a whoop band, but it's like basically a health, like a biometrics.
Mm-hmm.
It measures biometrics. So it measures my heart rate variability, my resting heart rate, my respiratory rate, my blood oxygen levels. It monitors my sleep, like my different sleep cycles, how
Mm-hmm.
long I'm sleeping, when I'm awake, the whole thing. It's very in-depth. If you're a nerd who really cares about your health, like I highly recommend getting something like this. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, it ended up being a blessing because I started seeing these trends in my heart rate where my heart rate was like slowly rising over the month or 6 weeks that I was taking this new medication.
Mm.
Fast forward, um,
It's interesting that you are receiving this data from a wearable
yes,
that's not being monitored by your medical professional.
correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's completely something I decided to do for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually, What's interesting is you can print out reports, like you can download reports and send them to your doctor. Like the company has created these really nice PDFs where you can download them and send them to different people. Some people, of course, will send them to their coaches or their personal trainers. Other people will send them to their doctors. But
and that, I mean, that's great. That's a great tool for you to have personally and for your provider to have. What is concerning to me is that this is not something that is initiated by your provider,
right.
right? It was something that you chose to do. You are taking this into your own hands and doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
And yet your provider, especially being on a new or a new dose of medication and adding medications and things like that, knowing that knowing how young you are, but also knowing that there's side effects and that there can be issues with having multiple medications at one
Right.
time, you would think that a provider would want to monitor you relatively closely, especially within the first month or two of taking medications. And that was not happening.
No, because um, what I'm about to tell you about the heart rate thing, I actually called this clinic that I went to multiple times and never got a response from them.
Mm.
Yeah. So I took the sleeping medication once, hated it, hated the way it made my body feel. I'm very sensitive to medication. And so I was like, I'm never taking that again. I refuse. And so that one was out the door. I decided on my own. But this other one, I was like, well, this is supposed to make me feel better. This is supposed to fix me is what I'm thinking, right? Because it's like I haven't really started my self-development journey yet. And one night I'm sitting on the couch and it's been a normal day. I had a meeting that morning in the city. I went to my meeting, stopped and got lunch, drove home, met my mom. We were hanging out. We went and got dinner. We came home, decided to watch a TV show on Hulu, I think it was. I'm sitting on the couch and I can just feel my heart.
Mm.
And I'm like, that's so weird. That's okay. Now, I am a very hyper aware person. I know my body very well. Like I'm in tune to every sensation my body feels. I've had heart palpitations before. I still have them. It's unfortunately kind of part of my anxiety and where my anxiety centers itself. But at this time, I didn't have all that information. So I'm starting to feel it and it's getting worse and it's getting worse. And my heart is beating out of control. And I say something to my mom and she's like, okay, we'll just kind of, try to relax. Maybe you're just stressed out from traveling or whatever. And it's getting worse and it's getting worse. Of course, then I make the mistake of Googling. And so then I start Googling. And at this point, I'm freaking out. And so I start having all these other symptoms. Like I'm having chest pains. I'm tingling. Like I'm having pain in my back, like shortness of breath. And so I am 100%, 100% convinced I'm having a heart attack at age, 28 or 29, whatever it was. You cannot convince me otherwise. And I tell my mom, I'm like, Mom, we need to go to the ER. And she's like, what? What are you talking about? I was like, Mom, I'm having a heart attack. And she was like, sweetie, I highly doubt you're having a heart attack. You're in great shape. You take care of yourself. Try to relax. I'm like, I can't. We're past that point. There is no calming down technique that is used for my normal panic attacks that is going to save me right now. I am dying. I am dying. And so we get in the car and she drives me to the ER. By the time we get to the ER, I cannot walk. I'm having trouble standing up. It is where I'm convinced I'm dying. This is 100%, this is it. It's happening. And of course we're in an ER. So they are like, well, we don't have time right now. So you're going to have to wait this out. And so they put me in a wheelchair and my mom's like, listen, we're going to have to put her in a more secluded area because it's we're done. She cannot function. And I've had many, many panic attacks in my life at this point. This was beyond any panic attack I have ever had in my entire life. Like it's on steroids. Like it
Mhm.
is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like it is, I'm freaking out. And I'm truly, I know now that it was a panic attack, but at the time it was a heart attack. Like in my mind, it was a heart attack. So of
Mhm.
course, when they finally take me to the back and they strap me up to everything, that they do tons of tests, we're talking CAT scans, EKGs. They put an IV in, like they get me in a room. They're looking for everything, and they're like, everything's clear. Like your heart is strong. There's no blood clotting. Like they do all the things, and it doesn't matter. Like this has been happening for hours now. And usually my panic attacks, are shorter.
Mhm.
A lot of people say their panic attacks last for like 3 to 5 minutes. Mine
Mhm.
have always lasted quite a bit, but this one was going on for hours at this point. And I am struggling. And so they put me in this room, and even after they told me like, hey, you're okay, um it's not getting any better. Like the symptoms are
Mhm.
still there. And then the symptoms of my panic attacks also started to kick in. So not only am I having like the heart palpitations, the tingling, the shortness of breath, the stuff I normally have, the hyperventilation, the nausea, the pure terror, like that's all starting to creep in too. And they ended up having to put something in my IV because like they couldn't bring me back down.
Mm.
This is a very embarrassing story, but it is a really important part of like where this is headed and why I changed my outlook on life.
Mhm.
And because that was 100% the lowest point of my life. Like I mean, I didn't even recognize. And this was where I had changed, like because I started going way downhill from there. And so
Mm.
finally, not long after that, I was able to finally open up to my counselor about what was happening. And I told her about the sexual assault incident, which I wasn't even like, didn't completely realize that's what had happened.
Mhm.
And then when I told her, and I know again, that sounds stupid, but I'm here to tell you that like sexual assault is not always how they put it in the movies where it's like really
Mhm.
dramatic with screaming and crying and like fighting. It's like sometimes it happens in other ways and you think it's your fault. And especially as females, I think a lot of times we are kind of like taught to believe that it's our fault. And because it was someone I trusted. And
Mm.
so I didn't realize the full extent to what had happened. I told her the story. And at this point, I'm a mess. I'm having suicidal thoughts. I'm to the point where I'm like, do I even deserve to be here anymore? Like now I'm having these panic attacks. I think I'm dying all the time. I'm sad. I can't get out of bed. Everyone must hate me as much as I hate myself. Like I can't live like this. I'm not worthy of this life. Like I can't do this anymore. And I just remember that night that I was having what I thought was a heart attack, just like sitting on the floor of my bathroom and just praying, right? Like God, I can't do this. Like I am done. Like I am done. Like this is the last straw. Like I can't live like this. And just basically like handing it over to him and being like, please don't let me die. But like I don't know what's happening right now. So if you could just like I just like was sitting there just like, please help me. Please
Mhm.
help me. Please help me. Like that was the only thing I could say, you know? I finally like open up and she's like, hey, good thing you're sitting down because we need to talk about this. Like you were sexually assaulted. And I was like,
Mhm.
what? And she was like, this is like nothing you just told me was okay. Like nothing you just told me was okay. Like you need to understand that. And so then it was
Mhm.
kind of like I had to process it all over again. So I
Right.
went from this like self-hatred to hating myself and not understanding what happened to being like, oh, I understand why I feel the way I feel, but now I need to process it for what it is. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was almost like I had to go through it all over again. And so this period from the miscarriage in at the end of 2017 until about a year ago was rough, horrible mental health, struggling, being terrified to die, but wanting to die at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It was this horrible cycle. I try, and then of course I'm really discouraged because I went the traditional path that everyone told me to take. I went and saw the psychiatrist because at this point I realized I need help. And that failed even harder.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, after all of this happened, I tried to call and never got a response.
Wow.
So I'm like, what do I do?
Right.
At this point, my primary care physician has stepped in and been like, we're taking you off this medication.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're switching up your other medication. Like, we have to do something because this is not like okay.
Right.
And so I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful that he stepped in and said, this, you're not fine, and we're going to figure something out. And so I will be grateful for that. Unfortunately, I did get put on a beta blocker for my heart because at the time they weren't entirely sure what was causing the heart problems. So, of
Mm-hmm.
course, traditional medical system, they assume if you're having heart problems, something's wrong with your heart. So they put me on a low dosage beta blocker. I did just get off of those here recently. So I'm very grateful for that. But time went on. I'm working through my stuff. At this point, I'm facing it. Like I'm now facing everything that happened head on. I had never really seen myself as someone who had been through anything traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I understand now that what I went through was a little traumatic, might be considered as trauma. I try not to dwell on that
Yeah.
because I think that that's kind of a buzzword in today's society, and that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it can be used as a crutch. And I don't want mine to be used as a crutch because like it doesn't define me. While
Mm-hmm.
in that period of life, I did think it defined me and it completely negated my self-worth and anything good I had ever done in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I realize now that it was a huge growth opportunity for me. That we can't always control what happens to us, but we can control our response to it. And I chose to be a better person
Mm-hmm.
and to grow. And I don't think I was a bad person then. I don't mean that either. It happened and it made me think I was a bad person because I didn't understand what had happened. Um, but I have grown into a more self-aware, mentally strong person because of what I went through. And so a part of
Yeah.
me is grateful for that growth, you
Yeah.
know, and everyone thinks I'm the few people who know are crazy when I say this, but it's like when I look back now, I'm like, I'm glad that it, and people are like, that's crazy. And I'm like, well, I
Yeah.
can't change that it happened, right? I can't change that it happened. So the only choice I have is to be grateful for the growth. And so what really started my functional medicine journey is when I'm going through all this and I'm really trying to find myself and reset myself to live our views. I heard a podcast with Dr. Daniel Amen, and he was talking about the human brain and all of the SPECT scan images he had done and his entire career of work and how he has a holistic view of psychiatry. And I was like, that's pretty fascinating. And I want to learn
Mm-hmm.
more about this. So I started doing a deep dive on Dr. Daniel Amen's work and was just really intrigued. And
Mm-hmm.
so I bit the bullet and I made an appointment, which unfortunately, for those of you who are functional medicine followers, you know that insurance doesn't cover it. So um, if you want to take that path right now in the current medical system, you have to pay for it up front or find a payment plan of some kind. I'm still on a payment plan. But I went and had my brain scanned. And basically what they found is that my brain had been stuck in what is called a diamond pattern, which is very common for people with PTSD.
Mm.
So it basically means that for the entire time since everything that had happened, my body was in a constant state of fight or flight. So my sympathetic nervous system was on 24 hours a day. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I was having all of these heart rate issues and constant panic attacks. And I was on edge all the time, and I was irritable, and I was having nightmares and all of these things because it was like my sympathetic nervous system was turned on all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm curious, really quickly, did you
yeah,
have your hormones tested, like anything with your cortisol or thyroid, adrenal glands, anything like that, in conjunction with that particular
so
scan?
once I saw my, because how it's actually a pretty cool situation. You do Amen clinics. I went to the one down in Dallas because that was the
Mm-hmm.
one closest to me. You do a very thorough intake. You answer a lot of questions about yourself, about your history, about medical, psychological, emotional, all of the above. You have a case worker or a patient care provider who's kind
Mm-hmm.
of the liaison between you and the clinic. They work with you directly. There's actually you actually pick people in your family to fill out questionnaires about you to get
Mm.
an external
A
perspective.
full, yes,
Uh-huh.
a full
And
view.
then
Yeah.
that once they match you with your doctor, then yes, that doctor will typically have blood work and things done. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have the blood work done at the same time as the scans because the scans are kind of like a whole process. You have
Mm-hmm.
to do a scan, stay the night, do another scan. And so it was kind of a lot. But then after I got matched with my doctor, we had blood work done.
Mm.
So, and that is something that I keep up with is my blood work. I'm a
Yeah.
huge supporter of blood work. And I think that, and anyone who starts to go down that functional route, like blood work is so important
Mm-hmm.
because it gives you a map of what's truly going on the inside. Like, and it's something that we've kept up with. Like, she's actually ordered more blood work that I will be having done like in the next week or so. And,
Mm-hmm.
I went to this clinic almost 2 years ago, so um
So what
or
would you
almost a year
say
ago,
was,
almost a year ago.
so what would you say in terms of your experience with your traditional medical practitioner or practitioners and the experience you had with this clinic or seeing this particular practitioner? Like, what would you say is the defining difference?
The defining difference is that I felt like I was being looked at as a whole human and not as a disorder.
Mm.
And I think that the impact that has is huge
Mm-hmm.
because through this now, in conjunction with my appointments with my patient care liaison, and all that, I also was doing my own homework. I was reading Dr. Amen's books. Dr. Amen also turned me to Dr. Mark Hyman.
Mm-hmm.
So I started kind of deep diving into the functional medicine world and really understanding the full capacity of the human body and how intertwined it is. And so through working with my psychiatrist at the Amen clinics, like I had made the choice on my own to make some changes. Now, do I think she would have probably encouraged this? Yes, but she didn't have to because I had already started the process. I cut out gluten, I cut out dairy. I started paying really close attention to like how I eat and what I was eating. For a long time, I basically cut out all grains.
Mm-hmm.
Um, completely and was doing a very uh primal clean protein and fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds type diet. I've had to put some carbs back in just because of my training.
Mm-hmm.
Because of CrossFit, I work out so much. My body needs the carbs to fuel my energy sources and to refuel my muscles during workouts because it's high intensity. But I try to pick clean grains, as opposed to like processed, starchy. Like I don't eat bread. I don't eat any kind of bread unless it's a like a paleo type bread. So I made all those changes kind of on my own. And my doctor was like, that's something we would have talked about, but it seems like you have already started doing all that.
Yeah.
But that's the difference, is they look at you as a whole person. Now, did I still have to get diagnoses? Yes, because unfortunately, for anything to be approved by insurance or the current medical healthcare system, you have to have a code put on your
Right.
file.
Right.
So she did have to put things down like post-traumatic stress disorder, which we now realize was like basically the root of, it doesn't define the things that I was going through as a child, but that like turn that went south real fast was PTSD, because my body was not coping with what had happened to me. And so she had to put that on my chart, and a couple other things just to get stuff approved so that I could get blood work done, so that I could get any prescriptions I needed filled. Because I unfortunately have learned that it's extremely difficult to come off of SSRIs, and that's a whole nother topic. So I've weaned down to a very small dose, but I haven't been able to completely come off of it yet. So there are those things on my chart, but it's like she didn't treat me based on, okay, well, you are this diagnosis. She's like, this is what your brain is showing. This is what the images of your brain are showing. This is what's happening in your brain. This is where you have a lot of activity. This is where actually there was like almost no part of my brain that had no activity. My brain is extremely overactive, which aligns with the symptoms that I feel. But she didn't treat me like I was a disorder. She treated me like, okay, this is what your brain is showing, and this is how you're feeling. Now, how do we change this? Like, how do we take steps to move forward and feel different? How do we take the activation that's in your brain and lower it? How do we get the diamond pattern to chill? How do we get these symptoms to alleviate? So we talk about a lot of things: diet, exercise, staying on for me, I have a very rigid brain. Flexibility is very challenging for me. So she's like, we've got to find this balance between you having a schedule and you staying on your schedule, because you do better when you're on your schedule, but also being able to cope if something doesn't go according to your plan. That's like that's a big thing for me. Like, she has these conversations with me. She's like, okay, are you meditating? Like, you need to be meditating about 5 minutes a day, because we've got to find ways to quiet your brain down. So it was this whole body analysis. She looked at this interconnectedness of who I was as an entire person, not just who I was of like, oh, you have these symptoms, so you must be depressed, or you have these symptoms, you must be this, because symptoms in people are just symptoms. They're not the root cause. And symptoms may manifest differently in certain people, and the same root cause can cause different problems. The root cause of autoimmune disorder and a lot of and mental health are essentially similar root causes. They just manifest differently in people, because we're learning that inflammation is at the center of everything. And I loved that, because it was a completely different approach. And it has changed my approach to how I look at my own health and the decisions I make for myself. And food is medicine. It absolutely is. So if you're eating McDonald's and chips and stuff out of a bag, and you're shopping those processed items and you're not paying attention to what's in them, like, you're poisoning your body. You're not helping your body. And those are things that I have taken very seriously. I completely changed the way I eat. I had always tried to be health conscious just because of my fitness and athletic background. But of course, my eating would change with my emotions. And as we've established, my emotions are big, right? So when I was on a roller coaster, when I was on an anxiety high or a depressed low, which is very common for people who are high anxiety, because their body can't handle the level of anxiety that they're at. And so they kind of crash and burn and have symptoms of depression. I would eat according to my moods. And I have changed that since going to the Amen clinics, learning more about my body, realizing that I'm not broken. There's not something wrong with me. I'm not an inherently sick, unwhole person.
Yeah.
Like she said, this is what your brain is showing. Now let's figure out how we change the patterns in your brain. And I made those changes. So now that's how I look at health. It's what am I eating? Am I staying on track? Am I doing the things that make me feel most like myself?
Mm.
Am I moving my body? Am I getting enough sleep? Sleep is huge. It's
Yeah.
huge. And do I still struggle with nightmares? Do I still struggle with night sweats? Yes, because that's something I'm going to deal with, but I've learned how to manage it. And
Mm-hmm.
it has made a huge difference because I'm now making these changes that take my whole body, brain, spirit, the physical sense of me all into one. And that's how I'm attacking my health. And
Yeah.
it's made a huge difference in just how I feel, how I function, and even who I am as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that when you first started your story, you started from the beginning with being 5 years old and having these memories and how you, what was going on and how you attempted to cope with those things. Because I think a lot of people would have assumed the most, um, the place to start would have been, graduation
Yeah.
and dealing with graduation, the moving, the miscarriage, all of that stuff. I think people really focus on those types of things as being the things that are most important. However, we know with functional medicine that things even in the womb
Yes.
are, they have an effect on us, right? If we come out with a healthy or maybe even start with an unhealthy microbiome from that beginning.
Yes.
So I think it's for whoever's watching or listening to this, recognize that the beginning isn't, in your 30s when you started to feel weird, or in your 20s when you were having, when you maybe went through a traumatic experience or whatever. Your beginning starts from childhood.
Yes.
And all of those experiences that you have, um, really add up, and they're all significant. I think that's one of the things that's so beautiful about functional medicine is those things aren't negated.
Yeah.
They're important, they're recognized, they're talked about. So that's really cool that you recognize that, and that's where you started with your story.
Yeah. Yeah, we are a culmination of our entire life experience. And that
Mm-hmm.
truly does start in the womb. I mean, there's research where they will test fetuses when they're born and they
Mm-hmm.
already have toxins in their bloodstream and they have taken one breath essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what we do, and like this is especially important for women to understand, like what you do while you are carrying that child has a profound impact on that child's future.
Mm-hmm.
And not just how you raise them, but what you are doing to your own body, and then the choices you make as a parent, what you're feeding them, what kind of lifestyle you expose them to is going to have a profound impact on the rest of their lives. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
really important.
Yeah.
And it's when you look back at your whole story, and to also don't take that as like, if you're like, well, my mom ate Big Macs and smoked cigarettes while she was pregnant, like that doesn't mean you're doomed. Like you can make
Right.
changes in your own
Today.
life. Like
Yeah.
today, like you have the power to change today. And that's the crazy thing when you're looking at these like longevity experiments and research and all of this data that doctors like Dr. Hyman are doing, Dr. Amen, people like Krisler are doing all of this research, this like their life's work has been around looking at the human body and figuring out how to make it healthier for longer. Like you can make changes today that add years to your life. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really important for people to understand, that it's like, if your mom messed up, if you messed up, if bad choices were made, if you drank too much alcohol or did drugs or have eaten Taco Bell every day for the past 15 years, like, you can make a change right now that changes the trajectory of your life. And I think that's what people don't get about functional medicine, is that they're like, that's too hard or it's too late. And so they give up before they even try. And,
Yeah.
if there's one thing that, because part of functional medicine is taking care of your body, but also taking care of your mind and spirit, and
Mm-hmm.
giving yourself the tools you need to make these changes.
Yeah.
And that's a whole lot up here, a whole
Mm-hmm.
lot up here. And, I have done the things and I don't even like the word diet. I hate the word. I think it has a negative connotation. What
Mm-hmm.
I do, the way I eat, it's a lifestyle. I'm not dieting. I'm not trying to get skinny. I'm doing what's best for my health. I'm doing
Right.
what's best for me to have a life where I can kick butt until I'm 90, right?
Mm-hmm.
To where I can go out doing the things that I love, not go out in a nursing home bed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but it's like, you have to look back at your life and realize that, like, none of us are these special, unique snowflakes who are going to get through this life unscathed. Like, everyone is going to experience pain. Everyone is going to experience heartache. Everyone is going to go through something bad. We are going to suffer, and everyone's like, dang, that's morbid. It's true, right? And
Yeah.
it's about what you have to learn, how to respond to those things. And, like, for me, I'm a Christian, right? So I look back, like, I look on Jesus and I'm like, he suffered more than any human could possibly suffer. And, like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a representation, like, that was a representation of his humanness. And
Mm-hmm.
we're humans, right? So we're going to suffer. But there's a whole new light to it. We grow from it. It's about how you respond to that pain you're feeling, because you're
Yeah.
not going to get through this life without experiencing pain, grief, heartbreak. You're just not. It's impossible. So what are you going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to let it ruin your life,
Yeah.
where you live in that hole of suffering for the rest of forever? Like, we all know that deep heartache and deep grief is going to change part of us. It's going to leave an imprint on us. It's going to take a piece of our heart and destroy it, never to be repaired again. Like, we all understand that. Okay, but what do you do moving forward?
Yeah.
And to me, functional medicine has become that vehicle, right? So I've been through some stuff. Great, everybody has. There are people who have had it a lot worse than I have. And no, we don't need to compare traumas, but we do need to put things in perspective. Like, there is nothing we cannot move forward from. We see people all the time who have been dealt horrible life circumstances, who are succeeding and excelling in ways that some of us can't even fathom, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what do you do with your pain? How do you grow from it? And where do you move forward? How do you take what you've been through and change the world with it?
Yeah.
Not in spite of, right? Not looking at, like, oh, well, this tried to hold me down. No, 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 no. Let's reframe it. How is it going
Yeah.
to propel you forward,
Yeah.
right? How is it going to make your life different, better? How are you going to change someone else's life by using your own pain as a catalyst to make a difference? For me, I can't do that unless I'm the best version of myself.
Mm-hmm.
When I started realizing that changing the way I eat and taking my supplements and, well, moving my body was never hard for me. I know that's hard for a lot of people. It has not been for me. But it's like, when I started realizing that those things are truly what's best for me and what's going to
Mm-hmm.
make me the best version of myself, so that I can go live my life and dream my dreams and make a difference, it was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I no
It
longer have
changes,
to eat
it
with the
changes
cycle.
everything.
Yeah, I no longer have to, it's not like I'm sad, let's go to McDonald's. It's not, I'm sad, let's go get ice cream, or I'm stressed out. It would be way easier for me to just go get a bag of goldfish out of the pantry and eat that for lunch instead. It's like those are things that I don't have to think about anymore, because it's like, that's not me. That's not who I want to be. That's not what makes me the best version of myself. I'm doing this because I know it's going to have an impact on my life down the road. I don't have to think about it. This is who I am, and I've taken what I've been through and I've grown from it, and now I'm here to make a difference. And I have to do what's best for me. I have to do what keeps me healthy in order to make that difference.
Mm-hmm.
And that shift, that refocus, it's life-changing.
It is. And it comes from self-discovery. It comes from learning. It comes from being more self-aware of what you need. And, I think you mentioned that, some things are more complicated for folks. But it doesn't necessarily have to be. You don't have to start everywhere at once. Pick one thing, right?
Yes.
You're going to focus on your nutrition or your movement or your sleep or your relationships. Like, start with one thing. What one area do you want to start working on? And then find some help, right? Get a health coach, find a receptive medical practitioner. It's okay to say, you know what, this practitioner isn't for me. Let's find somebody else. I mean, we had a medical practitioner that is a DO by label, basically. But after a decade of seeing her, she just was not the practitioner for our family. So we have shifted and moved on to different ones. It's okay to be like, you know what, this is not working for me. The ways that you're doing things, you're not receptive, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be confrontational, it doesn't have to be ugly. Just seek somebody else that is willing to listen, that is willing to work with you, that is willing to see you as a whole person and not a bag of symptoms, right?
Yes.
That is willing to help you in the long term, right? Sometimes, yes, medication is needed for the short term just to get you to a point where you can function. But what's going to be for the long term? In all of those areas, again, the lifestyle focused areas, relationships, sleep, stress, movement, all of those things are really going to be things that give you that solid foundation of being able to move forward, being the best version of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
Yeah.
As I know you're well aware, because you are similar to me in this regard, like when you do make this decision, like I don't want to make it sound like it's rainbows and butterflies all the time, because there is resistance, right? There is, like, you have to fight and stand up for yourself, because there are a lot of people who are like, I don't understand why you are like this. Like, just do what everyone else does. Go see the doctor like everyone else does. Just take the medicine like everyone does it. And you have to be willing to stand up and say, just because everyone does it doesn't mean that I believe that's what's best for me. And I'm the same way. I don't think that medication is inherently bad. I think we're too quick to medicate people. I think we're too quick to put Band-Aids on symptoms instead of trying to find the root cause of the symptoms. That's what functional medicine is all about, is finding the root cause. So if everyone's immediate response is to just medicate you instead of figuring out why these things are happening, like, you should question that. As a person, you should question that. And that's my stance on it. I'm not saying that medication is bad. Medication can save people's lives in certain situations. But if every time you have a headache, your go-to is an ibuprofen, and you're having headaches every week, like, we maybe need to figure out why you're having a headache every week. Right? It's that type of thing. If you are having heartburn to where you have to take Zantac or some kind of proton pump inhibitor or whatever every single day, okay, well, why? Like
Yeah.
you probably have some kind of leaky gut issue that needs to be looked at because your
Mhm.
microbiome is wreaking havoc on your body. I'm not a doctor, but that's what I would assume if someone told me that, right? Just
Yeah.
from my own research. So it's like, let's look at the why. Like,
Mhm.
why is this happening? That instead of
Mhm.
treating all these symptoms. Because if I continued to just have all my symptoms treated, I would have never found relief.
Mhm.
It would have been a constant cycle of just another symptom popping up and a symptom that pops up because of this medication or because of that. And I never really would have gotten to the root of my issues and had to face them head on, which was
Mhm.
really hard. It was
Yeah.
really hard and uncomfortable. I didn't want to face them head on, but I did. And it's made a huge difference. Am
Yeah.
I perfect? No. I struggle still. It's still a roller coaster for me. There are days where I will sit down at the end of the day and be like, dang, I wish I wasn't like this. I wish I didn't have to deal with this. Like, I wish my brain worked like a normal brain. You know, I have those arguments with myself. Like,
Mhm.
we're going to continue to have hard days. But when you're advocating for yourself and what you need to do, those hard days are a lot more worth it. You have
Yeah.
more purpose, more meaning, more direction. And I think that's important.
Yeah. I would, I highly agree with that. And I think once people get curious about what's happening in their body and around them in their environment, I think that really is the spark. And
Yes.
that was the spark for me. Once I started to get really curious and I started to learn things, it was like I couldn't learn enough.
Yes.
I can't read enough. I can't ask enough questions. I can't wonder enough. Like I'm just so curious now and I want to know more and more and more. And it's really cool because once I know more, I'm like, oh, I can change that. I can do better. I can, adapt or whatever. Or I can help somebody else.
Yes.
I can give them a resource, or I can give them a recommendation for a practitioner, or give them some things to think about, or some books to read, or some podcasts to recommend them to. Like, it just becomes this avenue of not just helping me, but helping other people around
Yes.
me.
Yes. Yes.
And it you I don't know about you, but for me, I can't not share anymore. Like I just
Right.
can't not do it. So it's just it, and that's really cool. It's really fun to be able to do that. Um gosh, the time has flown by. Like I
Yeah,
feel
I'm a
like
little long-winded. Sorry about
well,
that.
I feel like we could keep talking for another 2 hours. Like this has been such an amazing conversation. I so appreciate you sharing all the details of your story, especially things that have not been shared publicly,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
I know that's very personal, and it takes vulnerability. But I 100% guarantee that someone somewhere is going to be inspired and motivated by what you had to say. And so I so appreciate your time and you sharing so much of yourself with my audience.
Well, thank you for having me and giving me the chance to share my story because ultimately what drives me is the thought of being able to help someone else. So
Mhm.
if there's one person who resonates with this story and can find a way out of the darkness that they're in, it's worth it to me.
Awesome. Well, you guys go find Courtney on social media. You will just have a ball following her. And for those of you that uh, enjoyed what you heard, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the combos. Like the conversation and drop us a comment. We want to hear what you have to say and what you took away from this conversation. So thanks again, Courtney. Thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.